Hello, and I am back here on the channel. It is the most earth-breaking, ground-shaking, the man, the myth, the legend, and never media show money-taking Lee Cole the Fourth. All right, so let me kick this thing off. I am here tonight to bring you guys a non-spoiler review on the new film that just came out, the 2019 release of Hellboy. And this is an interesting one. This is an interesting one because this movie is has got me conflicted. Got me conflicted like I've never been conflicted before. At the end of Us, I was conflicted about the ending. As creative of a movie as that was, it led way to a lot of things in my mind to go off and kind of think about. This is different. This is different because I'm going to go through my points, and I'm going to go through what the general basis of the story is. I'm going to give you the pros, the cons, and then whether or not you should see this film. And before I get into this, let me tell you, I say all the time, movies are subjective. Something I might like, other people won't like. Something you guys might like, I might not like. So I respect all opinions. Now, I've been reading reviews on this all day to kind of get a feel before I go into the theater. And it's kind of an interesting thing. When I first saw the trailer, I was not on board. I did not, Ron Perlman is my Hellboy. So I came in kind of not expecting much. And maybe that's why I actually didn't dislike this movie. Okay, now Rotten Tomatoes gave it like a 11%, and we all know how honest they are. And so I went to a couple of other trusted YouTubers that I watch for reviews, and surprisingly, they didn't like it. So I really went into this thing expecting to be a person who didn't like this film. But I did. I did. It's one of those strange movies where I actually liked it, and by all rights, it's not a good film, and I'll get into the reasons why. But it's one of those things, it's one of those weird things that happens where you're watching it and going, you know what? I don't think personally this is a bad movie. I just don't. I kind of enjoy this. So I'm going to go and do this like a review, and then in my final thoughts, I'm going to tell you how I personally feel about the movie. That way I could just knock this out for you. So the premise is very simple, very generic, and easy for people to follow. And this is going to go to my pros, because I'm big into comic book lore. And I felt like this movie actually followed closer to the comics than the original film did. It actually had a lot of callbacks to the source material. And maybe that's why people won't like this, because the original was tailored for a crowd that might not understand the comic book lore, where this one stuck pretty close to some of the source material. So, and plus Mila Sorvakovich is in it, and I gotta say, I have a big blind spot when it comes to her and her films. So, let me just break this thing down for you. The first thing, the premise of the film is quite simple, like I was saying. We have our favorite devil, demon thing caught on Earth named Hellboy. He's raised by humans, and, apocalyptic drama goes down. What's up? Good to see you guys. Apocalyptic drama goes down, and he is part of this thing called the Paranormal Bureau Department of something. It's like the PBD or something like that. And their sole mission is to hunt outer worldly things, and Hellboy is the spear, so to speak, of this movement. He is the thing that they call to fight the things that humanity cannot fight. Now, another great actor, Ian McShannon, is in this, and I love his work. He was originally on Deadwood. He does American Gods. You see him in John Wick. This man gets work. Now, people complain about him, but there's something about his on-screen presence that they said they didn't buy him as the father. I didn't buy the original guy as the father of Hellboy. Actually, it was the opposite. In this one, I brought him more as a father because you have to remember, in the comic books, this man was the founder of this division, and he's a very cold and calculating man, but he has a love for Hellboy. In the original, they played up that father-son thing a lot, but it's like, you know, it's like also, too, they kind of forgot that Hellboy is a demon. He's a weapon. And that dynamic, even for the originals, never worked for me. So in this one, he's more cold and calculating, but you see sparks of like that father-son bond. There's certain moments in the movie where the critics say they couldn't buy it, but I honestly could buy it. I could buy him as that distant father that loves him but can't express it because he's like this dude who runs an organization that hunts demons. So, I mean, I actually brought the relationship. The other thing in this is that there are certain individuals that are introduced and they become like a ragtag team against this thing that's coming. Mila Jovovich plays a character called the Blood Queen, and she wants to bring about the end of the earth and has an obsession with Hellboy. So that's the Clef Notes, basically, you know, the same apocalyptic drama, you know, big bad evil, and Hellboy has to stop it. Now, my pros. Most people are going to say, they're going to say that the movie doesn't have very good visuals, but I strongly disagree. Maybe from a CGI perspective, it was on and off at points, but aesthetically, I really like the aesthetics of this film. Like, when they were going for an apocalyptic scene, and I'm not going to give away spoilers here, this is a non-spoiler review, but there are certain moments where you're like, holy crap, it's going down. I mean, the end scene is graphically violent. I mean, it is so brutal and visceral. The gore plays in for me. It actually works as a con. Because in the original, there was not a lot of violence because it was PG-13. So there was a true apocalyptic feel towards the end for me where I felt like this was a real big threat. Prime. I'm gonna take Devil's Advocate. I like this movie, and you know what? People are gonna disagree with me, and that's okay. I think this movie is gonna be highly subjective. I honestly think there's gonna be people who like this film. I mean, average moviegoers. Now, the pros for me are the aesthetics. I appreciate the aesthetics, especially the cataclysm, the way that things unfold. I liked it. I'm not ruining anything. This is in the previews, but the fight scene with the trolls was by far the highlight of this film. Like, it's brutal. You really see the vulnerability of Hellboy, even though essentially he's indestructible. It doesn't mean he can't be hurt. And I liked it. It gave Hellboy a very grounded, like, real-world feel. Like, yeah, he's this demon thing that might be indestructible, but it doesn't mean he can't be beaten. He can't be, he can't, like, you know, get knocked out or get, you know, hazy or whatever else. And the guy who played Hellboy, David, I forget his last name, he's on Stranger Things. He's amazing in that show. People weren't feeling his performance was one of the gripes, and I disagree. I think that him playing Hellboy is actually, he brought a different kind of thing than Ron Perlman did. Ron Perlman nailed the humor, but this guy nailed the seriousness, I guess. He nailed the darker tone that this overall story was going for. So, Yeah, he nailed it differently on a different level, and there were a few jokes. They didn't land for everyone. There was a couple of things that he said that I thought was funny. Um, so, for my pros, the cast was spotty with the acting, and I more blame the script. I think a lot of things that were written for the characters to say were not very good, but with the material they were given, they exceeded the expectations of what was written. So, I mean, they tried. You could see that there was a passion from the cast making this film, which, once again, I appreciate putting love into your film and really trying to take something that, by all accounts, is mediocre and trying to excel that writing by your acting. I can respect that. There was no SJW politics, so that was refreshing. The female in it had a very progressive role and a good reason for being on the team and actually having the powers that she has. And I honestly thought she had some pretty cool powers. So I was really digging that. And she was able to defend herself, but there were moments where she let the male cast step in when they got overwhelmed. And I appreciated that because it showed a balance within the team. Like, Hellboy is the definitive leader, but these guys aren't necessarily just throwaway support. They are functioning as a unit. There's literally a scene where they're all fighting together, and it is cool as heck to see, literally. So the dynamic between the characters was pretty spot on. The post-credit scene where you're wondering where a certain character is explained. So, yeah, that all worked for me. Now, the cons. There are quite a bit of cons, and it's going to sound crazy because I like this movie, and you're going to be like, well, with so many cons, how can you like this film? And I will get to that when I do my final thoughts. The cons to this film, the CGI is a hit or miss. Sometimes it looks atrocious, and then sometimes it looks absolutely stunning. The script and the dialogue is very all over the place. Some things hit, a lot of things miss. Some of the end of the world jargon, I like to call it, comes off kind of corny. Got that 90s kind of nostalgia, like, ha 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 ha, I'm going to bring about the death of the world, blah, blah, blah. That kind of feel to it. And the storyline, I understood it because I read the comics, and it was a mismatch of like several different volumes at once. And I think this is where I appreciate the movie, is that I followed the through lines, and the very end credit scene tied in one of my favorite characters. Yeah, I just doing a quick review here because my Wi-Fi is spotty. So the through lines for this was, the through lines were very, they were all connected pretty well, but if you don't follow the comic books and you're a regular moviegoer, the storyline can seem pretty schizophrenic, but the one main storyline about the Blood Queen wanting to bring about the end of the world and then tie it into Hellboy, all, to me, ties in nicely. It connects. There's a beginning, middle, and end, okay? And I'm happy with that. I guess after seeing Captain Marvel and the Unicorn Store, I've set my bar a little bit lower for how I'm really going to get on a movie. But I gotta say, not seeing anything political in the film was nice. It was just an action flick with a generic story to get us from point A to point B. And if you look past it and don't try to find anything really deeper, it's actually quite enjoyable. Just my opinion. I mean, some of the things that are said and the way that people react to things was also pretty realistic. I mean, you're talking about creatures attacking humans, and some of the human responses are actually pretty spot on, and I found it hilarious. But on the whole, I mean, if I'm looking at it objectively as a, fair and honest, non-biased critic, the movie is bad, but for me is good. The movie as a whole should actually be a bad movie, but I didn't find it bad. I actually came out of the theater quite satisfied with what they were trying to do. Now, Guillermo del Toro did the original, and he is one of my favorite directors. I watch everything he does. He's a brilliant writer, brilliant director. He's got a natural eye, and he has the most gorgeous aesthetics in film. And I will argue the point because Pan's Labyrinth is a masterpiece, okay? But in Hellboy, with the new director, I felt a certain respect for the property, and I felt that they could do more with the rating that they had as opposed to a PG-13 rating. I always felt the originals were watered down to what Hellboy could have been. This time, it was turned up to like level 10 on the visceral action, but the story kind of suffered. And I think if this thing got a sequel, this guy could probably find a good balance. He introduced two pivotal things, and I would really like to see what he does with them. There's two key moments. Stay after the credits if you go and see it. There is one particular character who is synonymous with Hellboy that if they get a sequel, they will bring into it because it's very much just like, bam, he finished this story just in case he doesn't get a sequel, but if he gets greenlit, then there will be a very big synonymous villain in the Hellboy universe that is mentioned, and also there'll be another person you don't see in the film, but they're mentioned, and they will be brought in as a character. I don't want to give away too much so that you can see it for yourself, but I was pretty hyped when I saw it at the post-credit and end-credit scenes, so they were definitely worth staying for. So my final thoughts is this. This movie is highly subjective. I mean, this thing is going to be highly subjective. I'm going to watch more reviews, and I think this is going to fall into the category of either you overlook its glaring flaws and you like it for what it is, or you just say, this thing is garbage and I don't like it, and I don't think that there's an in-between here. It's going to be like a Venom where either people liked it or they hated it, and there's no middle ground. I liked Venom. A lot of people didn't, but it had a huge box office because most people did. Hellboy is in an interesting situation because there's nothing else really slated that will compete with it. Shazam is not doing as good in the box office as people thought it would, and it seems like a good option to Shazam if people want to see a more adult superhero movie. So I'm going to be intrigued to see what this does because I feel the budget was low and they're going to at least make back what they put into the film because I don't know what the box office numbers is, and I will check that out when I do my spoilers review because I really want to highlight some things in this film that work and some things that don't, and why it's being rated so low, because then you'll understand exactly why this film is going to be very split in the middle. Do I think Rotten Tomatoes was wrong in this instance, or the critics? No, their critiques were fair. They were accurate. The film does have some pretty big problems. The storyline's all over the place. The acting is a hit or miss. And there's a lot of gore in it to cover up the problems that the film does have. But for me, the music was amazing. That's another the music was spot on. Like, they had old school rock music, which is what I think embodies the feel of Hellboy. I mean, the fight scenes, when they had a fight scene, or when he's walking or something, they played just the right song for the moment. So the music was spot on. It had the not heavy metal, but hard rock, like old school, like 70s, 80s rock, kind of hard rock, like AC/DC era kind of rock in it. So it worked. So, yeah, I think the character needs to be developed more if they get a sequel. The supporting cast needs to be fleshed out a bit. and they need to bring in the villain I'm hoping that they're bringing in, because that would add a good back and forth with Hellboy. Because this villain, Milo Jovovich, does a good job, but you don't feel the back and forth. It's another weird kind of thing you'll see when you see the movie. She's not really his foil. She's trying to let him know what he is. So, and, you know, there were some good emotional acting from this guy who played Hellboy. So he brought emotional depth. He just has to work on the comic delivery. And if he can get both of them, I think he will have a pretty fair interpretation of what Hellboy is. So that's just my honest views. I don't know how everyone else is going to feel, but myself, I like it. Now, am I going to rate it highly? No. I'd say this was where I put Captain Marvel. It's about a 3 out of 5. And I know that's a harsh rating for something that I'm not berating with negative criticism. Do I think you necessarily have to go out and watch it right away? No. I think if you haven't seen Shazam, if you haven't seen Dumbo, or you haven't seen the other good movies that are out, then I would go and see them first. But, you know, if you're at the theater, there's nothing else you haven't seen, you haven't seen Shazam yet, then I would, or you've seen it and you want a good alternative, you want something where you don't have to think a lot, it's got a simplistic plot, and you just go bam. Like, the action is nonstop. So once they get past like the first 5 minutes, it's just nonstop fighting, action, crazy, like visceral violence that's just like nonstop in this film. And it's a pretty good flick to just like not think, unplug, and watch a good movie for about 2 hours, and then, you know, you probably, if you're like me, you're going to be like, I want to see where the next one goes. But do I call it a masterpiece? No. Is it even objectively a great film? No. But is it fun to watch? I had fun. I laughed at certain points. I went, ugh, for certain points. And there were 2 or 3 fights that were really pretty astonishing. So if they do more action, like actual fighting, and a little bit more story and flesh out the characters better, I think film number 2 could be really good in the direction that Neil set. So anyways, in the comments below, let me know what you think, if you want to go see this movie, if you have any interest, you know, if you did see it, what you like, what you don't like, hit me up and let me know. I will be back with a spoiler review to really break down the film and tell you the exact good parts of it and the really terrible, not so good parts and bad choices. And then why overall I think that it works. Anyways, this is my channel. Thank you very much. If you like this video, please smash that melee button. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you know anyone who would like non-biased, fair reviews and objective opinions that you could take or leave, because it's up to you. Films are subjective. Anyways, I'm going to call this one an evening. Get back, lay down, and get ready for a long day. But anyways, this is Liko the Fourth, and as always, me and my favoriteest person in this whole world, who I hope will be returning for Will of the Force, Rose Tico, will see you at the movies. Good night, y'all, and God bless.